Hello, I'm Dane, again, still Dane, and we're still doing the Jesus is, fill in the blank with whatever adjective, whatever truth about his character, the way he relates to people, whatever emerges from a verse-by-verse reading of the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament. This week it's Jesus is compassionate. Jesus is compassionate. I have a question. What's the difference between compassion and empathy? I was mopping a floor a little while ago, and I, for some reason, got to reflecting on that. And it occurred to me, without a dictionary, I might be technically a little off here, but I think compassion has more to do with an action, an act of compassion. For example, we have this international relief organization called Compassion International. Well, is this group a group of hundreds of thousands of members and teachers and relief workers out in the field in all these countries? Are they just feeling a feeling of tenderness or pity, a feeling of compassion or empathy for the kids they're serving, the orphans and poor kids and so forth? No, it's about they take the resources sent in by people who donate like us, and they teach the kids, they give them medical care, they feed them and so forth. They're doing an action. Even if they're in a bad mood or they've kind of gone cold and they're just burned out doing all this relief work, they're still doing acts of compassion. So that I think empathy is something you can identify more as a feeling because you've been there, you've been in their shoes, that kind of thing. But I don't think this is what we're talking about here. It's really about action, and how more appropriate than to read the book of Mark, because it's the gospel that has so many acts of compassion and miracles of healing and feeding the hungry and delivering people from demons that have been suffering all their lives. So I'm babbling on, but let's jump right back into the Bible. Chapter 1, verse 41. Well, back up. 40. A man with leprosy came to Jesus and begged him on his knees, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Verse 41. Filled with compassion, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing. Be clean." Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cured. That's an action, and he said it in very tender words, but it was more than just words. He cured the man of leprosy. Back up a little bit. We've read this before in a different context, but verse 30, Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they, the disciples, told Jesus about her. So he went to her, he took her hand, and he helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. See, this is a very gentle, apparently quiet act of compassion and healing this woman with a fever, and probably didn't involve a bunch of crowds around with cameras running and cell phones flashing and so forth. It was a true act of compassion. He wanted his disciples to see it, but it wasn't for the crowds and it wasn't hyped up. It wasn't to just so he could authenticate his credentials as the Son of God or anything, I don't think. So it wasn't just about healing, though. There are so many examples, dozens more, of him healing people, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands. He also, if you go up to chapter 6, verse 34, you find out that he also shows compassion by feeding hungry people, feeding the hungry. So 6:34, they were in a boat, and he and the disciples get out. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he rolled his eyes back and went, "Oh no, more people, more pressure. Give me a break." No, he says, he saw the large crowd and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. And then a few verses down, he makes sure by a miracle working power working through his disciples, he provides bread and fish to feed 5,000 men at least, but probably thousands more women and children. So he not only teaches greatly, which gives great insight and inspiration to the people, kind of an act of compassion, but then he backs it up even more with the act of compassion of giving them bread and food and sustenance. So it's like a multi-dimensional compassion there. By way of application, how might the Spirit be calling us, you and me, to show acts of compassion? Well, that's the first thing. He wants us to actually show acts of compassion, not just feel mushy, pink, sentimental thoughts. Maybe even for people we don't like, people we don't really think much about. Obviously family members, although we can take them for granted, so we need to say, Spirit, is there a family member I've just been ignoring and they have a lot of needs and maybe I could show some acts of compassion in your name by your power to help them out to your glory? Is there a coworker at work that I overlook? Maybe I have this problem. I don't know their first name and I've been at this place I'm at for 3 years and I don't know some of the maintenance guys' names. And they don't always look like they're really happy. They might be going through something at home or having health problems. That could be something I could find out about and act with compassion. And strangers. There's a lot of suffering people all the time around us, but we could think of currently right now, a lot of people have been out of work. They've lost their businesses. They're going through a real time of uncertainty and loss, and we could look for people who are really feeling the sting of that right now from the COVID-19 outbreak, followed by the economic implications of that. And there's also people in great distress and anger right now over the death of a man named George Floyd, a man in Minneapolis, what most people consider to be an unjust murder by an officer of the law. And so there's just a lot of anxiety and pain out there. Maybe we could show an act of compassion to someone in our circle or just a little beyond. So I'll leave that with you and pray that we all hear from the Spirit about that very specifically. So Jesus is compassionate, and let us be also. Bless you, and that's all for now. See you next time.